Hello and welcome students to your first digital class with me, Mrs. Sangeeta Sinha. Today I am going to discuss with you one of the most fascinating and the thrilling stories of Ruskin Bond, A Face in the Dark. The moment you hear this intriguing title, it itself is suggestive of the two most important elements, the face and the darkness. The face is related to the darkness. So certain questions comes to the reader's mind as to whose face is it, why is it associated with the darkness? And Ruskin Bond at the end leaves us with certain interpretations. Ruskin Bond, an Anglo-Indian writer, is one of the most prolific writers who has reflected on many interesting topics: Anglo-Indian experiences, paranormal experiences, and horror stories with a change in the socio-economic, political, cultural scenario of India, infusing all the elements of horror stories, that is fear, surprise and mystery. Being an Indian author of British descent, he spent his early childhood in Jamnagar and Shimla, and his interest in supernaturalism led him to write certain ghost stories like A Face in the Dark, ghost stories from Raj, and A Season of Ghosts. But before we move further, I would like you to keep your books ready and don't forget to put or jot down the important points. Mr. Oliver, an Anglo-Indian teacher coming from a mixed parentage, was returning to his school at the outskirts of the hill station Shimla. He taught in one of the most reputed schools of India, which ran on the English public lines. That is, it was one of the elite schools, as its syllabus, its curriculum, its method was inspired. They were inspired by the English schools of UK. Children belonged from affluent or wealthy background, and this was seen in the dressing style, wearing caps, blazers and ties. Even the school had been praised by one of the most reputed magazines in the world, Life, in an article about India in which it was called the Eton of the East, one of the famous colleges in Windsor, UK. The author gives us a picture of the social strata or the social background of the schools. Being a bachelor, he was returning from the Simla Bazaar, which had cinemas and restaurants. But while returning, he used to take a shortcut through the pine forest during the evening. Here the author leads us cleverly in a very deft manner through the setting of the story, in which he mentions the pine forest, the pine trees which are huge, and a forest which is without any human habitation, is dark and a mysterious setting. And the blowing of the wind, the strong winds, further produces a very sad and eerie sound. The author further talks about the flickering of the light of the torch which Mr. Oliver has with him to illuminate through the narrow pathway through the forest. The author again creates a sense of interest, creates an interest in the reader's mind by focusing on the gleam of the torch, which is fading due to the batteries which are running down and no longer illuminating a longer path in the darkness. And its light is also flickering and not steady enough to have a better view of the boy whom the author comes across while sitting on the rock and in the pine forest. Seeing the boy, the narrator stops all of a sudden, because boys were not supposed to be out after dark. It was not allowed according to the school norms. Therefore, he tried to recognize the miscreant and inquired sharply, as he was strict and he was very strict about breaking the school norms. He noticed that something was wrong as he drew near. And what was it? He saw that the boy appeared to be crying. Now here, the boy doesn't cry, but he appears to be crying. His face, he could not see his face as his head is hung down and his body was shaking convulsively. His face was held in his hand and therefore it could not be seen. Moreover, it was a strange weeping because it was absolutely soundless. Now, the narrator, his anger changes to concern. Why? The boy who has broken the rules now seems to be in trouble and he is crying. his body raked with his sobbing. These things made him quite uneasy because the boy was very nervous. The narrator went near the boy and asked him that why he was crying, but he didn't get any answer. He asked him to look up, and the boy looked up. And what did he see? He saw the face of the boy, if you could call it a face without any eyes, ears, nose, or mouth. It was just a smooth, round head with a school cap on the top of it. What was the narrator's reaction? He was nervous. He dropped his torch and he started scrambling down the path. Oliver ran down the path, running blindly through the forest, calling for help. Blindly doesn't mean that he was blind. Blindly over here means that he was scared and he ran helter-skelter, wobbling through the pathway. He was running through the pathway when he stumbled upon a watchman. The watchman asked him why he was running and why had there been an accident. Oliver said, yes, he saw something very horrible, a boy weeping without a face. The watchman instantly asked, raising the lamp to his own face, that was it a face like this? The face was identical to that of the boy, with the only difference that there was no eyebrows. The author has not described whether the boy had an eyebrow or not, but here the watchman didn't have an eyebrow. At that very moment, the wind blew the lamp out, and the reader is left out with his imagination, with his interpretation, that what happened next. Now, we move to the setting of the story. The story is set in the pine forest on the outskirts of the town of Shimla. It is a windy evening, and the setting of the story is quite strange, mysterious, and in a prevailing supernatural atmosphere. We come to the theme of the story. The story is written in a very straightforward, simple manner, creating an atmosphere of supernaturalism, especially by the use of the words like sad, eerie sounds, shook convulsively, raked with sobbing, etc. To create an eerie atmosphere, Bond has used expressions like when there was a strong wind. The pine trees made a sad, eerie sounds that kept most of the people to the main road. He carried a torch along the pathway. He carried a torch with him. The title of the story is the most appropriate and the most justified one, revolving around the central character, Mr. Oliver, an Anglo-Indian school teacher who had seen a so-called face, a face of a boy, without any feature, in the dark, windy evening while returning from the town amidst the pine forest. The strange experience of facing the boy without any distinct features in the eerie forest makes him tremble with fear, and his torch falls from his hand. As he turns and runs blindly through the forest, gripped with fear, he stumbles upon the watchman, and who himself does not have a face with features. Therefore, the title is rightly apt, as Mr. Oliver encounters a face the second time, which he could not distinguish clearly. Even now, the gush of the wind blew the lamp, and darkness enveloped around.